Here's a fictitious situation. You've got a friend called Tom. Tom's in a band signed to a major record label under a standard record company contract. Tom's the drummer and doesn't actually write the songs. There are 4 members of the band and a manager taking 20%. The band's first single has just been released and has done really well. It's sold over 100,000 downloads. As is only natural, Tom's gone down the pub and is buying drinks for everyone. What he doesn't realise though is even with those 100,000 sales, the most he can ever hope to earn from these downloads is around £1,600, which is the equivalent of about $2,400. The recording and the promotion took 6 months. This scenario may be fictitious, but these numbers aren't. So let me introduce myself. My name's James, I'm from F9 Audio, and I'm one half of a dance act called the Freemasons. I've been lucky enough to work professionally in music since I was 19. Over the last 10 years as the Freemasons, Russell and I managed to DJ over the entire planet, as well as working with some of the world's biggest recording artists. And if we can do it, so can you. What I want to do here at F9 is arm you with as much information as I can about the structure, the mechanisms and the terminology within the industry, so you can make the best decisions. Because there's one simple thing to remember. Without us, the artists and the producers, there is no music industry. Knowledge is power. So before we go back to our fictitious band, there's one topic that I want to clarify for anyone thinking of working in the modern music industry. Copyright, or simply, rights. In the music industry, there are 2 distinct types of copyright, mechanical and publishing. Mechanical rights deal with the actual master recordings. So back in the day, this would be the master tapes of any record. These days, everything's held on computer systems. Master rights are traditionally owned by the record companies and encompass every single sound in a given recording, from the lead vocal all the way down to the bad tambourine sample in the chorus. They're called mechanical rights or mechanicals because it used to be a mechanical process to physically replicate any music, whether that be pressing the music onto vinyl or manufacturing CDs, cassettes, or any other physical format. Even though we are now almost fully digital, for simplicity's sake and to keep the contracts backwards compatible, we still use the term mechanical or mechanical rights. The second category of rights or copyrights are known as publishing rights, and publishing is the intellectual property of the song. The lyrics, the actual notes of the song's melodies. It's a slightly more abstract concept than mechanical rights. It is another industry term with a history. It's called publishing because the companies that had control of this particular set of rights physically manufactured or published sheet music. Obviously, this still happens to this day. If you go into any local music shop, you'll often see books of sheet music that are licensed to be printed by the publishing companies. So any use of any song or any piece of music's intellectual property, whether that be the lyrics or the notes or the chord sequences, are controlled and protected by the publishing companies. Every major record label has its own publishing arm, and most independents do as well. But one thing to be very aware of, it is perfectly feasible and actually quite common for artists to be signed to one label and published by another. Now for our band example, we're just going to be concentrating on mechanical royalties. As in our example, our fictitious drummer isn't involved in the songwriting, so wouldn't be due any of the money coming from the publishing rights. So let's go back to the figures that we mentioned earlier and break down a standard music industry download. I'm recording this video at the end of March 2015, and all of these figures are based on the UK industry. Every country is slightly different and some dramatically so, but these are a good yardstick for how the money is divided within the music industry. And most importantly, how much you can expect to receive in your pocket as a recording artist. The standard price for a download in the UK is about 99p, so let's assume it's £1. This means that we can work in percentages throughout these figures. And the first chunk is an enormous slice taken by the government. UK sales tax is called VAT, and currently it's set at 20%. That means it's 17% or 17p of the £1 price of our download. Next up, and an even bigger chunk, is about 25% that goes out to the actual electronic retailer. Now this may seem huge, but other areas of retail have a higher markup, and if you consider that the data centers supplying us with all this music are costing billions to build, it's not difficult to see how they've managed to negotiate this kind of split. Next up, distribution. 6% or 6p is often split off into distribution costs. There are a number of businesses sat between the record companies and the digital stores called aggregators. The aggregators will take the master files, encode them into the correct format, and then send them on to all of the digital stores in one hit. For this service, they charge a small commission. In the UK, the next 8% goes to a joint organisation known as the MCPS or PRS. They'll be the subject of another F9 video, but to cut a long story short, most of this money, minus a small commission from the MCPS, will end up back in the hands of the publishers, and then finally distributed to the songwriters. This means that there is direct money from the sale of music to any songwriter, even though they may not actually be physically appearing on the record. And obviously, if you do a cover of someone else's song, this money is returned to them. Nearly every country has its own organisation similar to the MCPS, although the rates taken from sales may vary dramatically. So now for the biggest chunk, 44% or about 44 pence of a £1 download. And this goes back to the record company that has actually released the music. In the majority of cases, this is also the mechanical rights holder, although this isn't always the case. Compilation albums are a good example, where the release will contain recordings from a variety of record companies, and this part of the money has to be divided up between them. But that's not a topic for us to get into now. This 44% is where any artist royalties will come from. But please bear in mind, this is not your share. This is the record company's share. We'll look at contracts in more depth in another video, but for now, just take my word for it. On a standard record company contract, somewhere between 7 and 9 pence enters the artist's account for each sale. If we take the average of 8% or 8 pence, this means that 100,000 sales will generate £8,000 for the artist. In our band example, there are 4 members and a manager that takes 20%. If you do the maths, that's 20% each. And 20% of 8 grand is £1,600. And just one more thing to note. This is before any of the recoupable costs of the recording and the promotion of the record have been taken into account. Now, this all may seem frighteningly small fry at the moment, but when you have a hit, there is a snowball effect. The income for any modern artist in the industry is a patchwork of different sources, and when you have a big hit, bearing in mind it can happen on an international level these days, there is always enough to go round. But just be aware that unless you're selling huge numbers, it can be a hard slog financially. Especially when you consider that in the UK, the government is actually earning twice as much as most recording artists from each sale. So now I'd like to offer you 3 solid pieces of advice for your journeys through the modern music industry. Number 1, always keep an eye on the numbers. Quincy Jones probably said it best. There is music and then there is the music industry. And if you don't keep an eye on the business side of things, you may not actually be able to afford to carry on making music. In my experience, the best way to do this is to find a manager or management company that you truly trust. It is predominantly the manager's job to look after the business end of any artist. But there are numbers within your work that you should also take personal responsibility for. As a simplistic example, if you decide to join a 16-member collective, any money coming into the collective will have to be divided by those 16 people. However, if you're in a 4 or 5-piece band, a solo artist or a duo, you're going to be earning far more money than you would do from the previous example. Now, it may seem quite cold to be talking about an artistic endeavour in such business terms, but the music industry is littered with stories of people that got ripped off along the way that didn't keep their eye on the numbers. Number 2, live performance. In the modern industry, it's become increasingly important to have a live aspect to your work. All live venues have real-world expenses, electricity bills, security bills, promotion costs, etc., etc. As a result, live tickets have only gone up in value over the last 20 years, whereas recorded music has gone down in price in real terms. If you can build a strong fan base that will come out and support your concerts, you'll have a continued and sustained source of income. And obviously, I can speak from real-world experience when I say, if you can DJ, do. DJing is now the most efficient form of live performance, as the technology has made it simple for performers and promoters alike. It's got to the point now where a DJ can literally turn up with just a pair of headphones and a laptop. Keep your eye on the festival posters. You'll be surprised to find even members of guitar bands are DJing. Number 3, writing. If you're not involved in the songwriting process of the music that you're recording, you're going to be missing out on any of the income that could come from the publishing rights. So my advice is get involved. Learn to play another instrument if you have to, but aim to be a part of that creative process. Outside of any business concerns, it still is one of the most rewarding parts of this industry. So thanks for watching this first F9 Audio Industry 101 video. For more tutorials, visit us at f9-audio.com or subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if there's anything you'd like to see in a future video, please get in touch.